right, everybody ready to go? I'm going to call us to order. MCE Board of Directors meet July 20th. And I want to, before we get started, I know we have at least Mike Anderson remotely. Good evening. Can you hear us?
I can. You sound loud and clear here.
Fantastic. And we can see you. Do you have anyone there with you?
We have one member of the public and staff.
Fantastic. Excellent. Very good. All right. Board announcements. Does anyone have anything they'd like to announce?
I've got a couple of things.
All right.
I want to introduce Eric Zell over here. Stand up, Eric. Eric is a governmental affairs consultant, and he was instrumental in helping us deal with a lot of labor-related issues in Contra Costa County, and really broke loose the deal that enabled first the county and then a lot of cities to come into MCE. So thank you, Eric.
Good job, Eric. Appreciate it. Any other directive matters? Welcome, everybody. We got some new faces we don't see every time. See? All right. Public open time. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on a matter not on our agenda? Seeing none. Heard from the Chief Executive Officer, Dawn.
So I have a few items this evening. I wanted to remind folks that we are video conferencing via webinar from Lafayette, and that's what you see on the screen there. And hopefully they can see us as well. So when you speak, if you can state your name, that'll be helpful just for our remote folks to keep track of who's who. Also, just wanted y'all to know that we have a new set of microphones that seem to be working better than the last round. They are sensitive to noise. You can see the light come on when you are speaking. Sometimes it takes a second for them to kick in, but you shouldn't need to move them around. And if you're naturally soft-spoken, you may need to lean a little closer to the mic. The next thing is I wanted to let folks know that we had a press release go out today on the 11 municipalities in MCE's territory that have opted up to 100% deep green. And I just wanted to suggest a round of applause for all of those communities. And I'll just briefly state who they are. So the cities and towns of Corte Madera, El Cerrito, Larkspur, Mill Valley, Napa, Novato, Richmond, Ross, and San Rafael, and the counties of Marin and Napa have all voted to join Deep Green. And the town of Fairfax already was a part of Deep Green, getting service really from the beginning, as well as Belvedere, San Anselmo, San Pablo, and Sausalito, who are the first MCE member municipalities to opt up to Deep Green. So we've just seen a huge movement in the last 6 months of folks joining Deep Green, and just wanted to express a lot of thanks for the leadership that's been demonstrated. I think it's really, it's had a big impact on our percentage in Deep Green, and it's also demonstrated to the other members of the community, businesses and residents, that this is a good choice to make, and we're seeing more movement there too as well. So big thanks to everyone there. Next, I wanted to share 3 brief videos that I think will be of interest to folks. The first one that I'm going to share is a video about the status of MCE Solar One. And just as a reminder, this is a local renewable development project.
My name is Christopher. I'm the safety manager here at Solar One. This is kind of an overview of the entire project area. We're here right now inside the trailer. The project is broken into 2 sections. This first section here is a tracker. It's built on an old reclamation pond, and because this area is allowed to be penetrated, we put a tracker in. This section over here, which corresponds to this section on the map right here, this is broken into 2 phases, and this phase is connected to the tracker system, and together those 2 equal 8.5 megawatts an hour. This area here is a landfill. It has a cap. It's not allowed to be penetrated, so the entire system is going to be ballasted, including all the conduit, no penetrations allowed anywhere. This here is the 3rd phase, which is a standalone 2 megawatt phase. So 8.5 megawatt, these 2 comprise, and this here add up to a 10.5 megawatt system. So far, as of today, July 12th, 2017, we are staging materials, we're mowing the lawn, surveyors that are coming out that are setting control points. Tomorrow we're going to have a third-party survey coming out to check their points, make sure that everybody's control points are all aligned. So when the system is installed, that's essentially where we're at. We haven't actually begun construction yet. So just setting the table, putting the silverware on the table, and getting ready to start.
Great. So MCE Solar 1, once it's built, will be the largest publicly owned solar project in the Bay Area, 10.5 megawatts, and it is under construction now. It's going to be employing approximately 340 folks with a minimum hire requirement of 50% residents from Richmond. We have staff on site once a week monitoring, and a lot of photos will be dropping onto the website soon. So what you've seen there is how it looks as of last week, and we've already seen even more activity with delivery of materials, and we'll be giving you updates and sending you a web link to additional videos as the site progresses. The next video we want to show is an overview of renewable projects throughout our service territory that are already completed or in more later stages. So that was an overview of projects that we've got underway or completed. Very exciting. A lot of projects, mostly through our feed-in tariff, but also through some bilateral agreements. And many of those have created local jobs, many of them in partnership with Richmond Build. So big thanks to them. And the last video we have to show you is from a business in Lafayette. It's self-explanatory. So here we go on that one.
Y servimos comida que es saludable, que es buena para el cuerpo. Le llamamos en inglés food for people who eat well and live longer. La idea de trabajar con productos sostenibles y tener una operación sostenible en el restaurante a nivel completo, incluyendo limpieza y energía y el agua, siempre ha sido parte de nuestra filosofía. He crecido en los Andes de Perú y he crecido en comunidades donde realmente no conocemos la comida que viene refrigerada, porque no tenemos refrigeradora primero, y estamos acostumbrados a comer las cosas que se crecen en la estación y los animales que pueden vivir bien en la estación. Entonces, es en esa necesidad de poder regresar al sabor de las comidas de la estación. He tratado de replicar esa experiencia cuando he empezado a servir comida, porque es una experiencia que la gente tiene que darse cuenta de la diferencia de las cosas que son frescas. Tenemos bastantes refrigeradoras que están usando energía 24 horas al día, 7 días a la semana. Y siempre que antes que cambiemos nuestra fuente de energía, era siempre un problema que me dolía bastante, porque yo sabía la cantidad de polución que yo estaba causando solamente con las refrigeradoras. Y nunca pudimos pensar en poner los paneles solares porque no somos dueños del edificio y el dueño del edificio no está interesado. Qué perfecto que vino una organización que nos daba esa opción y no teníamos que hacer nada excepto cambiar la opción eléctrica, era todo. Entonces eso ha sido un sueño que se convirtió en realidad y contentísimos nosotros de poder finalmente eliminar cualquier polución que estábamos causando. Finalmente terminamos. Gracias por eso, MCE. El negocio no es una entidad que está lejos de la comunidad o lejos del sistema económico o lejos del ecosistema. Nuestra actividad tiene una repercusión grande en el todo de la vida, que nuestra energía es completamente verde, que no estamos creando polución a ningún nivel, que nuestro restaurante es, como dicen, 100% sostenible. Y que si es que queremos respirar aire bueno y que si queremos ver el cielo azul, es la única opción que tenemos. Y que los veranos no sean tan calientes y que los inviernos no sean tan fríos, sí tenemos la opción de ser activos, participantes, de reducir nuestra polución. Eso está tan lejos como una decisión, y eso es todo. Mi nombre es María, soy propietaria del Rising Lofe y soy verde fuerte.
Really. Just fantastic, John. I got to say that last video, although it did make me awfully hungry looking at the great food that she was preparing. That's one of the best statements about why to go, when we should all go 100% green, renewable, sustainable that I've ever seen. I think we're all going to have to get a clip of that and show it everywhere we can. And the video before that, I've got to say, for those of us who've been here for a while, we spent so much time talking about how much we wanted to do local projects, and the challenge seemed so great for a number of years, and to see that video with all these local projects coming to fruition, it's just fantastic. And I remember the first video at this point. So that was really great, Dawn. Terrific.
Great,
Yeah.
Thank you for accommodating those videos. And that last one was produced by a summer intern that came on to do videos for us. So she did a great job. So kudos to her. I also wanted to welcome a couple of alternates that we have with us this evening. So Mike Anderson is our alternate from Lafayette, and that's our remote participant. Welcome, Director Anderson. And then we have Elizabeth Patterson from Venetia. Thank you so much for joining us as an alternate tonight. Yeah, great to have you here. And then we also have Paul Fidel as well. I may not have pronounced that name. Thank you very much. Italiano.
That I
Grazie, from El Cerrito. So very good to have you here this evening. And then just to wrap up, I wanted to bring your attention to item 12 on the agenda, which we will not be discussing tonight. This is just an item that is in your packet. And if you haven't already looked at this item in your packet, you may want to particularly take a look at two items. So this is a regulatory and legislative update that's pretty quick read if you want to skim for headlines. It's pretty easy to get the gist of what's going on. I think the two things that I wanted to point out are the portfolio allocation mechanism, also known as the PAM application, by the investor-owned utilities was rejected by the CPUC, instead of application about in previous meetings, the CPUC has opened a rulemaking to examine the power charge indifference adjustment, or the PCIA. We're extremely encouraged by this decision. We've been pushing for this exact action to take place since 2012, and it's really encouraging to see the Commission going down this path. And their goal is to look at all the issues that we've been raising over the last few years, including transparency, ensuring that we're reducing the amount of volumes that go into the PCIA, and making sure that they are sold off at the highest value to minimize the PCIA. So that is an exciting part of the packet to take a look at if you have a chance. And then the second item I wanted to highlight is SB 100, which is a piece of legislation. This is a Kevin De Leon bill that's making its way through the legislature right now. And the goal of this bill is it's a 100% renewable energy bill. It's currently worded to allow 40% renewable energy and 60% carbon-free energy. And we're working on some of the details within the bill and the mechanics. Obviously, we support the intent of the bill, and we're wanting to make sure that the way that it is rolled out aligns with current law. So we're monitoring that, and we can continue to support the bill because we think it's a great concept, and there's more information about that in your packet. The last thing I wanted to pass along is just a committee update. So this morning we had an ad hoc contract committee meeting. This is the second one that we've had this year, and we're continuing to have them each month to work on the procurement for our existing needs. And going forward after tonight, we expect that committee will be working on our procurement needs for power supply for new communities that we're likely to be adding this evening. And my last announcement is that we do have our fall board retreat scheduled for September 22nd. It's a Friday. It's going to be in Martinez at the Cobra Experience. If you don't know what that is, it is a museum of fast cars. So apparently they host events, and we've taken advantage of the location to invite the Contra Costa Transit Authority and GoMentum to come and talk about some of the automated vehicles that they're working on, and they've accepted the invitation. So they'll be there. They may even be able to bring a couple of autonomous driving vehicles there for us to view as part of the museum experience. So this should be a great event. You should have received an Outlook invitation for this event. If it's not showing up on your calendar, let Darlene know. We'll make sure and fix that. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow up on that. And that's it for my report.
Great, thank you, John. That sounds like that could be a little bit of a distracting venue for the board retreat, but we'll do our best. And thank you for highlighting a couple items on the policy update. I think that was very helpful. Yeah,
If,
Sasha?
since many of us are going to be coming from here, I hope we can get some carpooling going to Martinez.
That's a great idea.
Just to throw that out.
Yep, thank you, Sashi. Any comments or questions on the CEO's report? Seeing none. All right, so next on our agenda is the consent calendar. There are 7 items on the consent calendar, and I'd like to take the first one, which is approval of the May 18 board meeting minutes separately, because I know sometimes people like to recuse themselves from the meetings. The minutes approval. So if I could get a motion to approve the minutes, assuming there's an item that somebody wants to talk about.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
And
abstentions? Pardon me?
Abstention or
Could you state your name? for the-
Elizabeth Patterson.
Thank you. Any other abstention? Abstention? Anybody else? All right, super. All right, so now let's take the rest of the consent agenda. Any comments or questions on anything on consent, Barbara?
Just there, I've got a little, I gave some comments to Dawn's Barbara Kohler Fairfax on 3. There was a little discrepancy in the not to exceed number, so I think we have that resolved now.
Yeah, I can clarify that. On the first page of the agreement, we had 64,000 as the not to exceed amount, and then in Exhibit B, Director Kohler made the good catch that we had 65,000 listed in the not to exceed amount there. So we've made the adjustment to the agreement, and the not to exceed amount will be 64,000.
Super, great. Thanks for catching that, Barbara. Anything else on consent? All right, I'd entertain a motion to approve items C2 to C7. So moved. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. So let's move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is request to receive the applicant analysis and consider the resolution approving the new Contra Costa County, the cities of Concord, Martinez, Oakley, Panola, Pittsburgh, and San Ramon, the towns of Danville and Moraga. As members of MCE, we've been looking forward to this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big part of tonight's discussion is to receive the applicant analysis. And we have a slide deck that John DeLessie is going to present. And while that's coming up, I'll just remind folks that we've spent many months now talking about the expansion to additional communities in Contra Costa County, dating back really to the retreat that was held last year, where we where the board recommended establishing an inclusion period for a period of 6 months that started in December of last year and wrapped up at the end of June this year. During that time period, we had 9 communities request membership in MCE. All of these communities are within Contra Costa County. Alex DeGiorgio and his team led a lot of the effort to respond to questions, present in council meetings. Many of these councils held multiple sessions, well, all of them held multiple sessions to talk about the potential of joining MCE. Some of them formed study groups that explored it in more depth, and some of them also even did surveys to ask their community, what the interest level was in joining MCE. So as a result of many months of engagement with these communities, they've all requested membership. So with that, we're going to jump into the slide deck. Can you get that up, Carol? And we're going to tell you the results of the applicant analysis. The applicant analysis is always the next step after a request from a set of communities after an inclusion period. And John's going to walk through that here.
Good evening, John.
Is this microphone on, or do I need to do something here? Okay, terrific. So my name's John DeLessie, and I'm going to present this item. So do we have the clicker thing? So part of MCE's process for evaluating membership requests is to perform a quantitative assessment of the expected fiscal impacts of adding the new customers to the program, and also determine whether adding the new customers, the new members, would result in reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and increase the amount of renewable energy in the California market. We call this the quantitative study, or the fiscal impact study, and that's what I'm going to present. We've completed that analysis, and I'm going to present the results of that tonight. So before getting into the new potential members, just kind of a refresher on the current MCE program and customer base. So as of today, MCE serves about 257,000 electric customers, which is amazing since we started with 8,000 in 2010. And it's been incredible to see this growth, see it continue. But annual energy sales of about, let's say, 2.8 million megawatt hours per year, peak demand of 484 megawatts. The renewable energy content of the current portfolio is 53% plus, so the plus is related to the Deep Green program. The 53% is the content associated with the default light green energy product. And carbon-free content is 75% this year, and annual revenues of about $200 million. So the membership requests here, the 9 new communities, this represents a very large potential growth in the program, potential for extending service to another 237,000 electric customers. That's total potential, so some of those customers will opt out, but that's total potential. And you can see here the geographic distribution of where those customers reside. Concord, unincorporated Contra Costa County, Concord, San Ramon, and Pittsburgh are kind of the heavy hitters here, and then the other communities, also with significant numbers of electric customers. This is information here then on the types of customers. This is all aggregate now for the 9 communities. Types of customers by end-use sector, the amount of energy that we expect that would be sold to these customers per year, and then the max demand. So those 237,000 customers would consume about the 2.8 million megawatt hours per year, and peak demand. So that would be, at the time of maximum, sort of at any instant, the maximum usage in these communities is about 525 megawatts. I think couple things to note relative to the current customer base is the sort of the per capita or the average energy consumption for customers in the residential class in the Contra Costa communities is larger than the current MCE customer base by about 23%. So they just tend to be larger consumers, whether it's bigger, I'm not sure, bigger homes, weather, what the factors might be. But we observed that in doing the study. And then the industrial customers, there's proportionately more industrial customers in the new communities, and those customers tend to be larger, about 3 times larger on average than the current industrial customers served by MCE. In total, average usage is about 13% greater than the average usage of the current MCE. This is kind of just a visual representation of the energy consumption by major customer segment. You can see that about half of it's residential, and that's a little bit more than actually our current customer base. Our current customer base, if you look at it, I think it's more closer to 45%. It's a little bit more weighted towards the residential and the industrial sectors, and then you've got the large, medium, and small commercial sectors kind of filling in the rest. Very, very small energy consumption related to agricultural usage and street lighting. Getting to the fiscal impact analysis. So the basic framework in how we're measuring, again, the question is, would addition of these communities either be neutral or positive from a fiscal perspective to MCE and its current customer base? And so the way that we look at that is we say, okay, what are the anticipated incremental revenues from sales to those customers, and what are the incremental costs? Kind of do the difference between those two, which would be projected surplus, and that would represent the fiscal benefit. So in regards to the assumptions used in this analysis, we've assumed that all service would be offered to all of the new customers in May of 2018. That's not necessarily what's going to happen. I think the plan is still being developed in regards to whether it's going to be one shot in May or a different month, or if it's going to be phased type of enrollment. And assuming the decision is, tonight is to go forward with the expansion, those details would come back to you in the form of a revised implementation plan that needs to be submitted to the California Public Utilities Commission. For purposes of this study, we just assumed everybody's going to be offered service in May in one shot, that we'd have a 90% customer participation rate, or another way of saying a 10% opt-out rate. And then in regards to projecting the incremental revenues, we use current MCE rates, and our projections are load forecast of the usage of the new customers. In regards to incremental costs, we looked at what would it cost to supply those customers, the products that MCE sells, so that 53% and 75% carbon-free product, and at current market prices. And one of the benefits that you'll see of expansion is that current market prices are lower than MCE's existing historical contract prices. We've seen, most of you I think are probably familiar with kind of the trends in the marketplace where prices had just been falling, particularly for renewable energy over the last several years. So as MCE expands, it's able to kind of average down its power supply costs. So in kind of putting a finer point on this measure of fiscal benefit, MCE, when it establishes rates, it generally has followed the practice of building in a 4% contribution to reserves. So in other words, when we go to set rates, we look at what are our costs and then add 4% to that, and that is a contribution to reserves. So we sort of treated that as, well, that's going to be a given. So if we were to expand, we would want to at least achieve that. Any surplus beyond that 4% is considered fiscal benefit or surplus that could be used for any number of things, additional reserves, rate reductions potentially, programs, or other worthwhile uses. So that's the measure of the fiscal benefit. It's really the surplus in excess of that 4% reserve level. So the results of the incremental cost and revenue analysis for the coming fiscal year, which would start in April, and again, we've assumed that these customers would be enrolled in May, so we only get 11 months of service to these customers for this fiscal year. We're projecting that that fiscal benefit would be about $33 million. If you think of that as if it were to be used to reduce rates, or what would that potential rate reduction be? It would be about a 9% rate reduction. Again, you may not necessarily use it for that purpose, but just to put it into context. The revenues are for this coming fiscal year are estimated at about $161 million, and total incremental costs are estimated at $122 million. Most of that, of course, is power supply costs. We are expecting additional, what you can consider overhead or other operational costs of about $10 million. I think that's pretty conservative. That was an initial estimate, and I think those numbers are being refined down probably by a couple of million. But still, we're seeing a fairly significant benefit to the expansion. And then moving into the next fiscal year, which would, of course, encompass a full 12 months of service, the fiscal benefit is projected to increase to a little under $36 million. Again, about 9% of total revenue. In terms of the costs that might be incurred in the current fiscal year, we do anticipate that there would be costs associated with outreach and noticing customers and a variety of other implementation activities. Those are estimated preliminarily at about $1.8 million. That number, again, that will also be refined and then brought, to the board as a potential budget adjustment or an amendment if the decision is made to move forward. This slide shows a little bit of, how is it that, so much surplus would be generated. So basically what we're showing here is at the current size on a per megawatt hour basis, you can think of our average cost per megawatt hour. It's basically comprised of power supply costs and other sort of overhead, think of it. So power supply cost averages about $61 a megawatt hour today for the current program, and overhead's about $6 per megawatt hour. With the growth and the benefits of growth, the power supply cost on average would drop by about $6 a megawatt hour, down to $55 a megawatt hour, and overhead would also be cut down to about $5 per megawatt hour. So the additional scale, the additional sales reduces MCE's average costs, and therefore the margin, if you assume a constant rate, the margin on every sale increases, and thus the benefit. So, we recognize in doing this study that there's a number of uncertainties in regards to power prices, for instance, until we're able to go out and procure and lock down those prices. The market could move a little bit. Opt-out rates may be different. There's, some question. This is a large amount of energy that we need to buy, so, there's different types of renewable energy. There's kind of what they call bucket 1 or PCC 1, which is the most expensive. And then bucket 2, PCC 2, which is cheaper, and then bucket 3, which we really don't use a whole lot of, is the cheapest of all. We looked at a sensitivity around, well, what if we need to use bucket 1 for all of it? That would be kind of a worst case, just in case that when we go out to the market, the supply is limited. So we looked at basically changes in power supply costs, changes in what type of renewable energy we would buy, and changes in the participation rates. And in all of these scenarios, there's still benefit to MCE of the expansion. The worst case scenario is if power costs were to increase by 30% between now and when we actually go out and contract. That's a very large and unlikely increase in power costs. And still, we would have about a 1% benefit to the expansion. So in running these sensitivities gives us a lot of comfort that when we say there's going to be a benefit, we're very confident that there will in fact be a benefit at the end of the day. It may not be 9%, but it's still going to be significant. Maybe actually better than that. We'll see. Okay, so then in terms of the other quantitative elements of the analysis, the MCE would be selling about 1.5, 1.6 million megawatt hours of renewable energy to these communities. That's the equivalent of, if you think of solar, which is really the predominant renewable technology these days, that's about 600 megawatts of solar. That's a lot. If we were to supply that with more of a baseload 24/7 type of a production renewable resource like a geothermal or biomass, that would take 180 megawatts or so of renewable generating capacity. So that's the total amount of renewable energy that would be supplied to these customers in, say, 2018, 2019. The increase in renewable energy that would be consumed, so that would be relative essentially to what PG&E is supplying or what the renewable portfolio standard requires, is 764,000 megawatt hours per year. That's the difference between MCE's renewable energy content of 53 and what the state's requirements are, which are much lower. And then in regards to the impact on greenhouse gases, we're estimating a reduction of 204 million pounds per year. That is also a significant number. If you translate that into number of cars taken off the road, that's about 20,000 cars taken off the road, the equivalent CO2 reductions of 20,000 cars. So really large impact, and that is a result of MCE's very low emissions rate that's associated with its portfolio at 75% today. These numbers are actually based on 2015 numbers because there's a lag in terms of the data of certified numbers, and so the most recently available numbers from PG&E are from 2015. And based on that year, there's a difference of 74 pounds per megawatt hour. We're on this trajectory towards 100% carbon free, and today we're at 75. So we expect that these reductions will continue or perhaps increase over time. When we're thinking about this type of, the scale of growth, I should say, one of the important factors is, what type of capital might that require? And does MCE have the funds available to support that scale of expansion? The answer is yes. So MCE has about $30 million in cash today and available credit through a credit facility with a bank of $25 million. We estimate that the cash requirements to support this expansion, again, assuming services offered to all of the customers at one time, is about $15 million. There may also be some collateral requirements associated with power contracts, but it's probably no more than 5 or 10 million, if any. We've been pretty successful in negotiating agreements where MCE hasn't had to post collateral. So MCE has sufficient capital to support this expansion. So wrapping things up here, quantitative analysis is complete, and the results are favorable, 33 to 36 million per year in additional funds that could be used to supplement reserves, other sort of worthy energy programs that the agency might want to pursue, or potentially rate reductions of up to 9%. We project increase in annual renewable energy use in the state of 764,000 megawatt hours per year, and reductions in greenhouse gas emissions of 204 million pounds of GHG per year. With that, yes,
Thank you,
I'm happy to
John.
take any questions that you might have.
I have a question for you. Great presentation. So would you talk a little bit about the impact on our hourly load profile and whether that will have any impact on our energy procurement strategy?
Okay. Yes, that's a great question. And so there's a little bit more information in the write-up that is attached to the staff report that looks at hourly profiles and how profiles of these new customers differ a little bit from the existing customer base. And so, what we found is it's a little bit more summer peaking, right? It's a little, I guess, kind of follows a little bit more of an inland type of a consumption pattern where air conditioning is more prevalent. But it's not a very large difference. So I would say it tends to be a little bit more summer peaking than the current system, the current MCE system, but not in a way that I would consider significant. In terms of the impact to procurement, we would buy to that shape. We would purchase power in the market, based on our projections of kind of those hour-to-hour changes in the load. Power does tend to be more expensive during the summer, but our rates also tend to be higher in the summer, particularly for non-residential customers. Residential customers, for the most part, the vast majority of our residential customers pay a flat rate. It's just for the generation service that we provide, it's just, so let's say 7 cents per kilowatt hour, month in and month out. Commercial rates are not that way at all. It's seasonal, so during the summer period they're much higher, in the winter period they're lower. So the higher summer consumption actually on the commercial side generates more margin for us. So we looked at that very carefully as part of this analysis, and our conclusion was, yeah, there are some differences, but it's not significant enough to really be that noteworthy of a factor.
Thank you, John. Rupert?
I have a quick question I'm just curious about. With respect to San Ramon, does it make a difference whether Chevron opts in or out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really good question because, with those industrial customers, you don't want to just, hey, we're going to assume 10% are in, 90%, or 10% are out, 90% are in. It makes a huge difference if one of them decides to opt out or participate. It makes a huge difference in the load that we buy. So we want to make sure that our customer outreach team, has establishes relationships and gets a good sense of, hey, are you interested or not? Because that's going to impact what we buy. Interestingly enough, and probably a little bit counterintuitive, it doesn't make that much of a difference to our bottom line. And the reason is, yes, those are very, very high volume customers, but the rate that we charge, and sort of what PG&E charges, which we compete with, is also very, very low. So relative to what it costs to buy that power, sort of that margin that we charge those types of customers, it's the lowest, per megawatt hour. We actually, that's the reason in thinking behind this sensitivity where we said, let's just run kind of this extreme scenario where we don't get any of those industrial customers, what happens to our baseline impact. And it went from 9% sort of benefit, as a percent of aggregate revenues, or you can think of it as we could reduce rates by 9%, down to 8%. So it only had a relatively small impact.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on that question, I was a little confused because you asked about San Ramon and Chevron. Most of what's in San Ramon for Chevron are corporate headquarters. So those are office buildings, not really industrial facilities, are they? It's a large facility. Are they treated any different? I mean, is that taken into account in terms of our assessment about what they're in
Yeah, so I guess I was interpreting the question, more related to like a refinery or a big industrial load. Not.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to clarify, because that's a big corporate campus.
Yeah, so I'd have to look at that to see, what that customer looks like, what rate schedule they're served on. It really depends. So if they're an E20 type, which would be basically our industrial schedule, and some of these big campuses could be that large. We have like hospitals and universities that are water utilities that are on that E20 schedule. The answer would be the same. But if they're maybe an E19 on a different rate schedule that does have a little bit higher margin, then that could be more meaningful. I don't think one customer though is really going to, regardless, is going to swing anything here. It's just maybe if they choose to opt out could reduce the benefit a
Yeah,
little.
I just wanted to clarify about the nature of the business activity that they have down there as opposed to what they have, for example.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because I didn't understand that.
Thank you, John. Sloan Bailey from Corte Madera. This is the slide I was most interested in. It's the same page number, I think, in the staff report. Could you just expand a little bit about what this means and the formula or what metrics are used? For example, where it says base projection 9%. What does it mean? 9% of what? Or is there a 9% chance of risk? Or what does that mean?
Yeah, no, thank you. So what that means is, let me just go back to the base projection. All right, there you see the 9% kind of at the bottom. So that says we're going to generate an extra $33 million over and above our 4% reserve contribution, right? So that $33 million, what is that relative to MCE's total revenue? And that would include both the existing customers and the new customers. So that's $400 million roughly. So you can think of that $33 million as a percent of the total revenue. In other words, and that's where, when I think of the potential for rate reductions, and again, it's not necessarily what you would do, but you could reduce rates by 9% by, cutting the total revenue requirement by that $33 million. So that's what the base case is. I'm just trying to express the $33 million relative to something, and I'm expressing it kind of relative to the total revenues of the program.
I think so. I had understood. So sensitivity, you mean sensitivity to the existing Marin Clean Energy, right?
No, so let me kind of finish the story. So that's the base case. Oops, going the wrong way. The base case is using our assumptions that we use for the study, right? Our best guess about market prices and participation rates and everything else. We're expecting that 33 million or 9% benefit. So then we say, okay, well, what if power prices are 10% higher than we expect?
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
benefit is now 8% instead of 9%. So we lost some money. We lost some benefit there. That's the nature of this.
Like a waterfall. For example, if you change factor B, then there's this. I get it.
Yeah, but they're all independent. So again, so the 10% change in market prices, then instead of a 9% benefit, we would expect a 6% benefit because it's costing us more to buy the power. The margins are less, right? Makes sense. If power costs increase more than that by 30%, then our benefit now is squeezed down to 1%. It's still positive, but it's not as significant.
And how remote are each of these different scenarios?
Yeah, I think 10% is, to me, that's like, yeah, that could happen. 30%, that's very, very unlikely. That's really extreme in the time period that we're considering, because we're going to be buying this power over the next few months. And if the market to remove 30% in that time frame, that would be extraordinary, right? So that's very remote. The renewables, that as I mentioned, that would be right now the way we buy renewable energy per our integrated resource plan, the policies that are set forth in that plan. We buy, most of it is through so-called bucket one, that's in-state, but I think 75% of it is bucket one, and then I forget the number, but a smaller percentage is bucket two, and then 3% is bucket three. So what we're doing here is we're saying, well, what if the bucket two market sort of dries up on us because we are looking for a large volume, and we had to, instead of buying that cheaper energy, we had to buy bucket one, right? What we'd otherwise. So we wanted to make sure we looked at that scenario because we are seeing, frankly, in the market there's less supply of that product. So we wanted to make sure we weren't missing something. But that didn't really move the needle very much. Again, we only lost 1% of that 9%, so the benefit would still be 8%. And then the participation rate, I'll just kind of fill in the gaps there. Again, the baseline, we assume 10% opt-out or 90% participation. This is a scenario where we have a 25% opt-out of new communities or a 75% participation rate. Again, that results are not terribly sensitive to kind of reasonable ranges of opt-outs. And then that last one, I think I mentioned, that is, if we kind of completely whiff on the industrial sector and get none of them, is that because there is a lot of them, there's kind of disproportionate numbers in these new communities, is that a big risk? Not really. We still see an 8% benefit, probably say $30 million instead of 33, something like that, even if we didn't serve any of the industrial customers.
Thank you for explaining that.
Hi, Emmett O'Donnell, Tiburon. What about the potential that the PCIA could increase dramatically? Is that factored into this as a sensitivity analysis? Because with the explosion of CCAs and everybody leaving PG&E, they'll be stuck with a lot of power that they're going to go to the Public Utilities Commission and get paid for to a large degree.
Right.
And that just doesn't show as a risk factor.
Yeah, that's right. So it doesn't show up in this analysis, and, you know, the thinking is, well, there's a couple of reasons for that is, you know, first off, that's going to impact all of our customers, existing and new. So it wouldn't really be unique to the expansion. But I think the timing of any change to that also is, it's not going to happen before we would enroll these customers. So it's more of a global risk to the program. But, you know, I think timing-wise, if that process were to play out, it's going to be a couple of years.
I had another question. Could we possibly use this 9%, the additional reserve amount, to lower rates going ahead? As we've done this in the past, when we've tried to roll into communities, we set our rates in April, and you're talking about bringing new communities on in May. So there's like a time frame in there that's kind of too short. If we could prospectively say, hey, we think we could lower rates earlier, that way we can make sure that that participation rate matched that 90% level or higher. That's, I mean, we've done that. I know we did that in the past. So will we be thinking to do that again in the future?
Yeah, I think it kind of, so it really depends when we get to the discussion around rate setting. You know, there's always that reserves, rate reductions, how are we compared to PG&E? You know, I know you've been involved in those discussions and that thinking. I think if MCE were to plan on a rate reduction, you know, it typically would go into effect in April, right? That's the start of the fiscal year. It may ultimately be a better question to the customer, you know, communications team than me, but, you know, I think that could be messaged pretty effectively if you've got definitive plans to adjust rates. Because usually, you know, we would announce something like that in February, right? And the notices are probably starting to go out about that time. So I think the timing could line up.
The timing does line up here.
What would the risk of preemptively lowering our rates be?
Sasha, would you state your name for that?
Sorry, thank you. Should have better discipline on that. Sasha McEntee, City Mill Valley. If we were to do something like that, what is the potential risk of lowering it in anticipation of customers that we don't have yet?
Well, I think, you know, we always kind of take that risk. I mean, we're always guessing at our customer base and our sales. So, you know, what I would take comfort in there is, you know, if we think the benefit's 9% and our participation rate is much lower than expected, the benefit would be 8%. So I would think if we're going to ultimately pass this through or some of this through as a rate reduction, we'd probably just want to be a little bit conservative so that we're not undercutting ourselves, right? Make sure there's enough room in there to at least manage this kind of this swing in potential participation rates. But, you know, it's just the nature of our business where we need to buy power ahead of time. We need to set rates ahead of time. It's all done on a forecast basis. And, you know, I think we've had a pretty good track record of hitting our numbers. And, you know, I think, yeah, when there's a large expansion like this, there's additional uncertainty, no question about that. But I think what's working for us here is that those numbers are just not that sensitive to relatively, you know, small change, or even, I'd say, fairly large changes in the opt-out rate. You know, going from 10% to 25% doesn't really hit you as hard as you might expect, right? In terms of the margins that are expected.
And one other thing that's worth keeping in mind is that between now and the time that we do begin setting rates for our next fiscal year, we're going to get more information about what power supply costs. We'll actually have many of the contracts in place by then, and so we'll have more information, and we'll be able to have a thoughtful discussion about where those revenues should live and whether we want to increase the amount that's going to reserves, because we certainly will have, larger budget and getting to our target of having 6 months, 4 to 6 months cash on hand will require more reserves. So that could be something that we want to do with a chunk of this. Some of it might be needed, or we might choose to apply some of it as a rate reduction. And we'll have more information about the need as far as rates go towards the end of the year as well. So fortunately, that's not something we need to decide tonight, but the good news is that there is going to be some additional revenue to work with, and we'll be able to make some policy decisions later in the year.
John, could you just calibrate us
Ray, would
on-
you state your name?
Yeah, sorry. Ray Whitty, Sausalito. Could you calibrate us on the opt-out percentage? Historically, what is it? And was there any difference with the new communities we enrolled in the last cycle?
Yeah, I'm guessing, Alex, are you like better prepared to answer that question? Okay.
Alex DeGiorgio, MCE.
God, Alex.
With a few exceptions, the new community enrollments, the opt-out rate has been substantially lower. It's been more like hovering around 10 to 12% for the majority of the new communities. Then.
Good.
Other questions? Andrew?
I've been asked to remind people to actually pull the mics a little below where you're talking, and then I think our remote folks will be able to hear us better. Thank you.
Andrew McCullough, San Rafael.
Excellent.
How's that?
Excellent.
So, given that we have approximately 10 months to double the organization in size, do we see any impediments to scaling in time? Is 10 months an ample schedule for us? And then as kind of a subset of that, and I'm thinking of this because of Emmett's question, elsewhere in the packet, or perhaps it was this item, we've been given an overview of proliferations, or of CCAs proliferating and coming online, in particular in 2018. So with all of these CCAs and new communities competing for power, do we see any constraints in supply? So, meaning, as you project cost here, are you fairly confident about what these costs are likely to be, and do you anticipate any problems acquiring power?
Yeah, I think I'll take the second part there and maybe ask Dawn to comment on the staffing and scale up there. You're right. There's a lot of CCA activity. There's a lot of buyers out there, a lot of demand. So it's a legitimate issue around availability and pricing. And I am confident that we'll be able to buy to find the supplies that are necessary at costs that are basically close to what we've assumed here. But I will admit there's a chance that we could go out and run into a supply issue. In which case, we might want to think about, well, maybe we do need to phase. I don't want to make that sound like that's a likely situation, but yeah, I would say it's possible. Because you don't really know until you go out. So it's going to be a process over several months of assembling supply. Some of the supply is under contract. Some of the supply still needs, a lot of it still needs to be bought. My expectation is that we will not have a problem getting those supplies, and I'm pretty confident about that. But you never know. You never know. So, but I think the good sort of position we're in is, we are able to control when the service is offered to the customers if that became a problem, or if that the time.
What about just general issues of customer service? I mean, we've always enrolled new communities, but never to this large extent at one time, and the volume of questions and issues that new potential customers might bring to the MCE staff. How are we going to be able to handle that?
I can speak to that, and Alex may want to tag on. Just responding to the question that came just before as far as speed of this expansion. Just last year in 2016, your board approved an expansion to all of the cities in Napa and 2 communities in Contra Costa County, Lafayette, and Walnut Creek. And that was approved in April, and service began in September. That was very fast. I think that we have intentionally set a different schedule with this expansion because of the size of it and the scale of it, where we're considering approval this evening, really almost a year before service will be offered. This gives us the fall and the winter to do the procurement. The outreach efforts and marketing and mailers will begin in earnest at the beginning of the year, so there's a lot of time to plan for that. So I think we're in a good position, and we have a lot more time, a lot more lead time than we've had with any of our other expansions to prepare for this. I think the other thing that makes this, from a public outreach perspective, easier to handle is the fact that it's all within one county. And it is all within a county where there's already been a lot of exposure to MCE. There are already customers being served in the county in many of the neighboring communities. Our staff has become very familiar with the community because we've been serving in that community for many years now. So all of those things have led to, I think, being more prepared than we ever have been for an expansion. I think also our relationships with leaders in the community and key stakeholder organizations will also bode well for the coming expansion. But Alex, do you want to add any more to that?
No, I don't think so.
Alex is speechless?
Enjoy the moment. Other questions or comments from the board? Yes, Elizabeth.
So, Catherine, on a follow-up with that, is there a role for board members to provide some assistance on the rollout? Speaking from our personal experience in the county with the only city in the county of Solano, and we came in, I think it was 85%, is that about right? So I'm happy to, Alex and I have talked about this, and I'm happy to be a spokesperson for those perhaps a little dicier communities.
Thank you. Yeah, relying on our board members is definitely something we do during the enrollment periods to help us facilitate the community outreach, to help identify who are the best, who are the people the groups, the organizations that can help us reach the largest constituency possible. So we'll definitely be relying on all of you.
Yeah, and also, board members have often helped us to identify events to go to, places where we need to be and when. And also some folks have like a blog with a wide reach of people, or a way that they're communicating with constituents, and they can spread the word about MCE and make sure folks know how to reach us if they have questions. So we've seen a lot of that in the past. It's always extremely helpful.
And I actually have another question that's way back that I was hesitating to ask it. And that is there an adopted policy on the share of revenue that goes toward investment for projects and fee tariff and other standalone alternative energy projects?
Yeah, so the MCE budget is broken out into a variety of categories, and the budget setting process happens on an annual basis. There are some special programs that have been set up over the years. We have a local renewable development fund, which is funded with 50% of our deep green revenue. It all flows into that fund, and that's used for pre-development work on projects like MCE Solar One and some of our other local renewable development projects. We also have funds allocated, for example, to a low-income solar rebate program. That's another example. So the budget setting is done with the board as a whole, and the executive committee does some pre-digesting before we get the proposed budget to the full board. And the proposed budget also goes through a month-long vetting process where it's presented and then adopted usually about a month later. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks.
Super. Other comments or questions from the board? Or you're just waving, nodding to talk. Okay, great. Seeing none, any comments from our public or staff? Anybody want to weigh in? No, seeing none. All right, so John, it looks to me as if there's 3 things you need here. and correct me if I'm wrong, right? You want you need a resolution approving unincorporated Contra Costa County, cities of Concord, Martinez, Oakland, Knoll, Pittsburgh, and San Ramon, and the towns of Danville and Moraga as members of MCE. Second, you need an amendment to the MCE JPA agreement. And third, you need a resolution delegating energy procurement authorities for new member communities. Am I missing anything?
Those are the three things.
That'll do it.
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, excellent.
Congratulations.
Fantastic. Yes. Right, I'm not sure what we're going to do about the conference table, but we'll deal with that challenge. We'll have to go up, yeah, absolutely. All right, well done, everyone. There's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone into where we got ourselves to tonight, so thank you, everybody. Okay, so next we're on to item 6 on our agenda, which is consideration of approving a third amendment to a credit agreement with River City Bank.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm David McNeil. I'm the finance manager at MCE. I won't be needing that. Thank you. I'm here to recommend several proposed resolutions that would renew our banking agreement with River City Bank. MCE has had a relationship with River City Bank dating back to 2010. They've been a great partner for MCE and a great partner for the CCAs in general. They provide services to a number of different CCAs and really understand the business, and we're happy to partner with them. The proposed third amendment makes a number of changes to the banking agreement, but I'll just give you a little bit of background on the purpose of the banking agreement. At the present time, MCE has no borrowings and no letters of credit. So it's an unutilized facility. We really use it as a backup in case we need it. And in addition, it's important for MCE to have a banking facility to project financial strength to the market and to our suppliers. Them knowing that we have this large, unutilized, untapped credit facility helps us negotiate better credit terms. So I won't go into too much detail about the changes. I'll highlight some of the changes to the agreement. Notably, we're increasing the credit facility from $20 million to $25 million. We're increasing the term from a 1-year agreement to a 2-year agreement. So this takes us out through August of 2019. There's several changes to the credit terms, which are favorable to MCE. We're reducing the borrowing rate 20.25% from 1.75 to 1.5%. That's for borrowings. And for letters of credit, we're dropping it from 1.25% to 1%. So these are all positive changes for MCE. I'll say parenthetically that we took this out to market and got some offers from several banks, very large North American banks, and this proposal compares very favorably to the other offers that we got. Any questions?
Questions? Yeah, Rupert, please.
Rupert Russell, Ross. Does this impact fees that we have to pay for this? Do we pay a non-utilization fee?
We don't pay a non-utilization fee. We do pay a facility fee, which functions a little bit differently, but it's a 15 basis points, so 0.5% of the 25 million. So in increasing the facility from 20 to 25, it's going to result in a slight increase in that annual fee.
I was just asking because since we're not using it, it's going to be more expensive.
It will be insofar as, yes, insofar as the total amount of the facility is going up and we're paying a percentage of that total facility, the cost will increase from $32,000 a year to about $37,000 a year. It's good value for money, in my opinion.
Other questions, comments from the board? Any comments from the public? All right, seeing none, it looks like you need 2 different resolutions. Is that right, David?
That's correct.
So one is approving a third amendment to the credit agreement with Riverside Bank in the principal amount of $25 million. And the second resolution is regarding authority to execute the third amendment to the credit agreement with Riverside Bank.
And is that motion for both of the resolutions, or you want them one
I
at a
want a
time?
motion for both, would be fantastic.
I'd be happy to make that motion.
I think Elizabeth wanted to do that.
We're gonna get that goes hard.
We're going to have to second.
I'll second that.
So, let me see, how many years of experience?
All right, we have a motion and a couple of seconds, I think. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? All right, thank you. Thank you, Mike. If I'm moving too quickly, just yell. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're not moving too quickly. You're doing a very good job. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, David, for the good work. Okay, so next is probably the most difficult issue on our agenda, which is a consideration of destruction of non-judicial public records. So.
Yes, thank you for being here to discuss this important item. I mean, it is very important. My name's Emily Fisher. I'm legal counsel. And agenda item 7, as Director Sears mentioned, is a housekeeping resolution that allows MCE staff to efficiently carry out our records retention policy and schedule that was adopted by the board last year. So this resolution delegates authority to MCE's Director of Internal Operations to destroy records in accordance with our adopted records resolution, records retention schedule. And so I'm happy to answer any questions at this point.
Emily, thank you for making sure we're doing things correctly. Sashi?
Sashi McEntee, City Mill Valley. Since I would assume most of these things are digital, why destroy anything? And although I know that there's some cost to retaining even digital records.
Well, without going into a thesis, which I could, about that, we have a records retention policy that really ensures that we're not keeping things past their useful or legal, meaningful life. There's also questions of server space. But there are many reasons why it makes sense to clean house and eliminate those things that we're not required to retain for Public Records Act purposes and storage space purposes.
Other questions from the board? Questions, comments from the public? All right, seeing none. Yeah, hopefully we only need one resolution.
Only one.
Excellent, all right. Would someone like to make a motion to approve a resolution delegating authority for destruction of non-judicial public records?
I'll move it. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll second.
All right, excellent, thank you very much. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? That's approved, thank you, Emily. All right, so next on item 8 on our agenda is an update on the MCE naming consideration conversations that we have launched.
So we're going to hear a presentation from Nicole Busto this evening, who's been assisting with some discussion around MCE naming. There have been many discussions at the executive committee level, really going back a few years, but more frequently since April. And there's also been a naming committee set up that's working on this with a little more detail. But we're in the midst of doing some analysis, and Nicole's just going to give us an update on how that process is going. There's no decision needed tonight, but we wanted to make sure that the full board was aware of this process, and we'd really also love to get any input that folks have as we're in the midst of the process now.
Thank you, Dawn. So I'm Nicole Busto, Deputy Director of Marketing Communications. And today we'll be discussing the history of MCE's name, the ongoing and current challenges that we face with the current name, and recent input that we received from MCE's board members, elected officials, stakeholders, staff, and community members regarding our name, as well as the current state of our naming exploration process. So when we speak about our name, and who our audience is and who sees our name. And those people include local governments and member municipalities, our customers, nonprofit community organizations and advocates, the media and the press, legislative and regulatory agencies, and of course, other CCAs. So MCE's name has evolved a little bit over the past. In 2009, when we were serving customers within Marin County and its cities, we were known as Marin Energy Authority, but as the entity that was providing the service, we called ourselves Marin Clean Energy, which did cause some confusion. In 2012, we conducted some marketing research. They performed focus groups and surveys for us, and the results of those focus groups and surveys helped to inform our branding as MCE moving forward. In 2013, we enrolled our first non-MCE community, our first non-Marin community, Richmond in Contra Costa County, of course. And at that time, we used MCE for the branding for that enrollment. So we were known as MCE Richmond in our enrollment collateral. However, we retained the name of Marin Clean Energy for all of our communities throughout Marin. In 2015, we continued to expand. This time, we are now including unincorporated Napa County, San Pablo and El Cerrito in Contra Costa County, as well as Benicia and Solano. And last year, 2016, we had an internal conversation to discuss the challenges that we were facing with our name, Marin Clean Energy. And we determined at that time to consistently use MCE, the initialism MCE, throughout our entire service. This would be in our communities within Marin as well as outside of Marin. However, legally, we are still known as Marin Clean Energy. After that discussion, we enrolled all of the cities within Napa County, as well as Walnut Creek and Lafayette. So our new service area, this is a map of our new service area following our potential new enrollment. And today we serve 24 members, 24 community members, 12 of which are in Marin County and 12 are outside of Marin in Napa, Solano, and Contra Costa counties. So the main issue that we're seeing with our name is, of course, that Marin does not represent MCE's current service area and excludes 12 member communities. So this has been problematic in devaluing our perception of our reach in regulatory and legislative arenas. It's caused some confusion in news articles and press, some confusion and a feeling of lack of ownership from some of our customers, as well as a lack of inclusive feeling within the new communities that we will be serving. So again, our current solution is the initialism MCE, and these are the two logos that we use. In the media, we recently have seen an uptick in the number of articles written about MCE, and this is just a brief example of a recent article that was released about MCE with Marin Clean Energy in the headline. The marketing team did sample 30 out of 171 articles that were written about us from August of last year to June of this year. And of those articles, 33% used Marin Clean Energy only within the article. 47% used both Marin Clean Energy as well as our accurate name, MCE. And we're finding that press and public agencies want to spell out that first instance of MCE, even though that they know that it is our proper name. And in only 20% of the instances did they use MCE in the accurate way. So as to further explore this, we created some surveys that were then submitted to the board as well as electeds throughout Contra Costa County. One of the questions we asked was, what do you think when you hear the name MCE? And the majority of people responded with Marin Clean Energy or Marin. 19% said it made them think of CCAs or the first CCA. And then a few other individuals said it made them think of mace, so trying to create a word out of the initialism MCE. One person said that MCE evoked nothing. There was energy utility, and notably only one clean energy response. So clean energy, of course, being the other 2/3 of the name MCE. Another question was, have you received any feedback from constituents about MCE's name? 60% said yes, they did receive feedback. 40% said no, they had received no feedback. And of those that responded yes, some of the responses were that they had heard, does it only cover Marin, or why Marin? Policy people think I speak to say Marin, or Marin Clean Energy, or Marin CCA. Contra Costa residents have said that they don't want to be part of a program that's just designed for Marin communities. And elected officials have stated, I don't want to join a program that has Marin in its name. Another question asked was, do you think Marin should have a different name? The majority of respondents answered yes, 65%, no, 25%, and 10% were undecided or wanted to hear additional reasoning as to why we should change our name. So of those that said yes, we should have a different name, some of the responses were that the name should be more inclusive. Another was that from a legislative angle, the word Marin in Sacramento communicates wealth and privilege and causes legislators focus on social justice, jobs, poverty, and diversity to not take MCE seriously. Of those that responded no, we shouldn't have a different name, some of those responses were that if we try to use the same acronym, use the same acronym MCE, and also that the history of the name MCE is not necessarily negative. So we passed around an additional survey to MCE staff, to our community representatives, including advocates and partners, and we asked them what the effect of MCE's name was on customers and stakeholders' experience of the brand. 61% said that it had a negative effect, 33% said a neutral or no effect, and 6% said that it had a positive effect on our brand. So we did have some qualitative responses, which I'll now get into, and some of them were positive or neutral. There was a brand equity response that in El Cerrito, most people have heard of MCE, and there's definitely a positive name brand recognition. Some people were okay with either way. I'm supportive of a more inclusive name change if you decide to go that way, but it's also fine to stick with MCE as a brand. Oh, sure. Okay, thanks. We're good. So one of the main responses with one of the challenges that we're receiving is with the acronym MCE. One is that it's not phonetic acronym. MCE isn't pronounced phonetically like ECLI or APIN, which makes people question what it stands for and negating any benefit we're trying to eke out by shifting away from the name MCE. Also, acronyms in general are not inspiring and have no meaning. It also weakens our identity. So having to respond to questions about our name with, well, it used to stand for Marin Energy, gives the impression that we're hiding from our Marin roots and disappoints Marin advocates and communities, while on the other hand, raising suspicion among non-Marin advocates. Not having a name we can be straightforward with, proud of, weakens our identity. Sorry about that. There's also been some customer confusion, so misperceptions about Marin's role. Residents ask why we purchase energy from Marin. Is it me? Is it my voice? Also, our name underrepresents our size and our impact. Since MCE is associated with just Marin, I don't think people realize how large the CCA has become. And we have some other naming confusion. Some people hear marine energy, others a lot as well. So throughout our Contra Costa communities, there seems to be a liability issue during our new enrollment outreach, which of course we will be having again in the coming year. The Marin behind MCE brands it as not Walnut Creek. During that enrollment period last year, there was a level of that group based in Marin is not like us in the communications I received, especially from those who are skeptical or upset about MCE. That was from a Walnut Creek staff member. From a Richmond staff member, they noted that the M will always stand for Marin until it stands for something else. From a local development point of view, there's negative associations among developers, as well as misinterpretations about Marin's power supply. Workers on our Richmond projects wonder why they are building power supply for Marin and wonder if we could instead build something for their communities.
Well, it's pretty funny.
And finally, from a legislative point of view, it obscures our social justice impacts to Sacramento. In Sacramento, legislators hear Marin and do not connect it with the diverse communities that we serve, particularly around low-income communities. Our name is likely undermining our advocacy in Sacramento and somewhat at regulatory agencies. Okay. But with all of those challenges, we are working towards a solution. So we held a special meeting of the executive committee back in June to discuss our current name challenges. They saw this very presentation. And the executive committee did authorize phase 1 for a renaming process. In order to get us through that phase 1, we identified Catchword as the naming agency that we would be working with. And we also identified members of our internal naming committee. So that core naming committee includes directors Sears, Bailey of Marin, directors Schwartzman representing Solano, and director Butt representing Contra Costa County. Representing our Contra Costa new member communities, we have Board of Supervisor Federal Glover, as well as future director Pope, Dawn, of course, Kelly, our general counsel, Alex DeGiorgio, deputy director of community development, and myself, deputy director of marketing communications. So the phase 1 activities that were identified by executive committee started off with a questionnaire issued by Catchword, as well as a brief was held recently with the naming committee and Catchword to discuss the parameters that they would be exploring a new name under. They then synthesized those parameters into a creative brief, which was approved by the naming committee. We are now in round 1 of the name development, so Catchword's team is generating some names for us to review, which they'll be presenting to us around August 1st. So hopefully at that meeting, we will determine a handful of names that we would like to present to the board. Oftentimes, a phase 2 might be needed for renaming processes. If the naming committee determines that we do need a phase 2, these are the activities that would fall under that category. So they would generate an insights document based on the first presentation. They would go into a second round of name development and do an internal trademark screening of about 750 names. Of those names, they would present about 10 to 15 to the naming committee. And we would select the top shortlisted names and perform a legal review done by external counsel and land hopefully on our final name. So the costs associated with a potential name change have been broken out here to two phases. So for the planning phase, which primarily are the costs associated with the naming agency, it's about $28,000 to $51,000 for the entire planning process. $25,000 being the phase one that was approved by executive committee, and then an additional $23,000, so bringing it to $48,000 total if it's identified that a phase two is necessary. For the implementation, our range is estimated at about $61,500 to $19,000 for updates that would need to be done. Yes. I did mean 16,500. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, transpose those numbers, but it is 16,500. So that concludes the presentation. Are there any questions, or I open it up to discussion?
Well, less questions, more comments. So this is Kevin Wilka with Walnut Creek, and marketing was my background. So these kind of things where I often helped companies with different types of branding ideas and advertising. The most complex thing for a company to be able to do as a new company, an existing company, is their brand. And in my, well, obviously being on the board less than a year now, but I think MCE has a good name. Everywhere I go, I hear that people are familiar with MCE, certainly not a negative connotation. And so by virtue of just the length of time that you've had, and as you grow, I think that the Marin name does need to change, because I do hear that there is some confusion. But keeping MCE, at least the acronym, I think is really important in my opinion, that this is something that you've worked to have this good brand recognition and a positive association. And so coming up with an M word perhaps that is more inclusive, it could be something like, I don't know, meta, mixed, even something fun like morning, which could at least connotate something beyond Marin and become more of this geographic footprint that we're looking for. But I think getting away from MCE and going into something else entirely is going to create a lot of confusion in the near term, especially as you're in this growth phase.
Yeah,
I would agree with that, because not Emmett O'Donnell from Tiburon, why spend the money to redo all the logo and all the things that you just outlined and the cost thing? I see the answer right on the board behind you, MCE, My Community Energy, or something like that. And that everybody can identify with my equals every single community that's a part of it. And you get to keep the logo, which, I'm sorry, not the logo, but the brand, which has been developed over the last 8 years or so. And I think it's an important thing to keep. And let's save all that cost that was on that slide and make it an easier transition.
Elizabeth,
Elizabeth Patterson. I agree with both the speakers, and a couple of comments. We spent the last 4 years going over fees and other things in a very extensive survey and examination with a consulting firm, NBS. And so we asked, well, what does that stand for? Kind of wanting to get a history. And she said, you don't want to hear the story, just settle with no better service. And apparently there's a divorce involved, and so, but anyway. So to me, it's just more clean energy, MCE, more clean energy.
It's good too.
And you can save lots of money, and I'll take a small cut.
Excellent. This group is really good on M words. I'm very impressed. Yeah. Other comments? Yeah, Barbara?
Quick thing. I've been on the executive committee for a short time, and I've come up with a few names. I agree that I frankly feel that we should stay with the same acronym, because I think there has been a brand built, and Denise and I've been coming up with names like My Choice Energy. I like what Elizabeth just said and what Emmett said. I think hopefully the naming committee is going around that, but I think Kevin, with your experience doing marketing, I think really bring really important ideas here that you're saying. Also being in Walnut Creek, that MCE wasn't a problem and people recognized it that if we change it so it is more inclusive, that will be helpful.
And there are lots of companies that use acronyms. PG&E is probably a bad example, but they exist. P&G is one that people probably don't think of Procter & Gamble as fast as they do just P&G. So there are acronyms that you don't have to come up with words to make them easier to say. And I think MCE still just rolls off the tongue without a problem.
Rupert Russell Ross, I just had a fundamental question, which was, has there been any board vote or decision to actually change the name in the first place?
This is just a conversation right now because of the feedback that you saw in the presentation that came really predominantly from staff with a lot of the rollout activities recently, but also there's been input in when folks have gone to Sacramento and also to the regulatory process. So what you heard in the presentation was input that various staff members had gotten in different kinds of arenas that raised the question of whether we should be looking at the issue of changing the name. So that's why we're having the conversation. We haven't gotten to an alternative name. We haven't gotten to even considering whether any proposed alternative name is a good one or not. We're really just having the conversation at this point, but we wanted to come to the full board to get everybody in on the conversation. So that's where we are.
I guess I'm really raising the question, though, as to shouldn't, before one decides that there should be an alternate, decide that you want to have a change?
Well, I think there's issues raised by staff of challenges with the Marin word that you've heard, and I think I couldn't decide in the abstract whether I wanted to change the name unless I personally had a sense of what some alternatives are. So,
okay, I'm not arguing for whether it's right or wrong to change the name, and there probably are strong arguments for changing the name, but I don't think we should be spending $50,000 or whatever without having made the decision that yes, we should be investigating changing the name.
well, that's the conversation we're having now.
Yeah, and I can.
But I'm saying we should have a board vote right now. So if this is what we're going to do, we should have a board vote that yes, we want to change the name.
I hear you. Don, do you want
That
to
would
add
be
on?
one idea. Yeah, I would just add on that the conversation that's happened at the executive committee level led to kind of an interest in getting more information before making that determination. And so staff was asked to do some surveying and figuring out, what are we hearing from our elected officials? What are we hearing from staff in other jurisdictions? What are we hearing from members of the public and advocates? And so that's the information presented just now. And in addition to that, there was an interest in seeing, well, what would be the alternative so that we had something to compare the current name to. So that's why we have broken the contract arrangement into 2 phases so that, we're not spending a whole lot of money out of the gate, but we're starting with kind of an initial exploratory phase where we bring in an expert, like the type of folks that Director Wilk is used to working with that really do naming as a business and can give us some recommendations and ideas about the strength of our current name and potential options if we wanted to consider changing it. And after having that information, we could then make an informed decision about whether we want to explore the change to the name in earnest, and that would be tied to board discussion. It's actually tentatively on the retreat as a discussion and potential action item at our board retreat. And at that time, we may decide to keep the name, but at least we'll have more information from the surveys and from the consultant that's providing some ideas to us.
We had started this conversation, I think about 6 months ago, at which point we come up with some potential alternatives, some of which I thought were pretty great, and then it was suggested to us that maybe it would be good to get a little professional input and not just leave it to our imagination. I do see your hand, Denise. So you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we have, 2 things here, because I agree with Rupert. I think we have, do we want to change the brand? Do we want to change the name? If we did take a vote tonight and the majority of us decided that let's change I just confused myself. Just change the MCE into something, then it would at least concentrate the efforts of the committee to come up with names surrounding MCE rather than go out and try to create a different brand. So I think that there would be some real value in finding out whether or not, I mean, I've served on the exec committee for 8 years now, and I know we've had a lot of discussions at the executive committee about this, not just that one special meeting, but a couple prior to that. You know, so I'd sort of like to see us go that route so that we aren't taking the money that's being spent towards this group, coming up with 750 names to go through when they don't have anything to do with MCE.
And I'll just chime in. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Yes, Len, do you want to go ahead?
So we had, Rupert, an animated discussion, is that a gentle way to put it, at the executive committee and we did not have a uniformity of agreement about the whole thing. Here was my takeaway from that. The executive board, after a couple of fairly intense discussions about it, uniformly did not want to spend any money on anything at all. Which I was wholly in favor of. However, it was presented to us unambiguously that the staff almost uniformly thought that the name ought to be changed, and that there were members of our board who also felt strongly it ought to have been changed, which to me would potentially be persuasive. And so we engaged in a discussion about what is the process by which we decide if we even go forward and spend money or effort and the ensuing aggravation and angst that we are now experiencing to discuss what the change should be. It's never been clear to me like what the best way to do this thing is. I have never been perfectly persuaded what to do, but I'm very sensitive to the fact that, first of all, if our brother and sister communities don't want the word Marin in it, then I can be persuaded, okay, that seems like a good reason. If staff feels like it's messing up their job in the legislature or trying to sell it to communities or to sell it to their member citizens, then that might be useful. It all appeared to me to be kind of anecdotal evidence, which might amount to sufficient amount, and it might not. I didn't really know. On the other hand, there's a timing issue because there's the introduction of new member communities that they want to try to get this out to. It's slightly frustrating to me because I've always thought that every action we do or any action we take ever ought to be in furtherance of what our mission is. And to some extent, changing a name, maybe that furthers the mission. Maybe we're undermining the mission if we don't change the name. I don't know. On the other hand, because we're in a bit of a catch-22, like how can you decide if you need to change it if you don't know what the alternatives are? Even that decision wasn't perfectly clear to me. So with a sort of let's just do something but retain the right to do nothing, we authorized the spending of some incremental amount in the low 5 figures to at least provide why we should do this and what the alternatives are, and we immediately agendized for the next board meeting, this one, and for ensuing board meetings to begin to engage in this kind of discussion, with the presumption that at some point we're going to have to like take a straw vote or actually vote, do we want to do this thing? And then assuming we do or we don't, what do we change it to? So that's my sort of uneasy and stream of consciousness description. If we have somebody from another member community who doesn't like the word Marin in it, and they feel like it's unjust in some way, that alone is probably sufficient for me to want to change the name, because what we're supposed to be doing is helping serve our communities and reduce greenhouse gases and make the rates better and so forth. And the name to me ought to be corollary to those. It ought not to be more important than those things. On the other hand, we've heard from people that Marin is a good thing and maybe it helps sell. I mean, who the hell knows? But anyway, long-winded answer. That's why we're where we are right now. We're discussing it. It's not clear to me we've made any decision about anything. I've tried as best I can to leave open a door so that we can at some point say, no, we don't want to do any of it. I'm very much in favor. We had stories on the executive committee about a lot of our member communities have spent vast amounts of money trying to figure out how to change names of things that in retrospect may not have been a clever use of money. So we all agree we ought not to spend a lot of money and then regret having spent it. On the other hand, how do you figure out the best name? Do we come up with 6 or 8 names and then we just vote? That can't be good either, right? Anyway, I'm open to suggestions. Here's again, one last comment to make. If anybody has any opinion about anything related to the name, please approach me or one of the other suckers on the naming committee. And I will do my best to record it and in a genuine way advance those opinions.
I think you said all that extremely well.
Okay.
That's an excellent summary. Sashi, I think you beat out Kevin very narrowly, so you go in.
So just a couple comments. One is an expenditure of 50K, I think, is a staff level kind of decision. If you guys wanted to spend 50,000, coming up with a list of names and bring that to the board, I think that's, a decision that you obviously should be made at the staff level. And then just a question from saying that Marine Clean Energy is our legal name. Is there, can we change the DBA? Is that like something that can be sort of inexpensively done from the legal side, or is it changing the name of the agency as far as, is it incorporated? How does that work?
Those are pretty insignificant costs, as a proportion of our budget. A couple of $1,000s, is what we would need to
Not
do.
in terms of cost, but in terms of like what would it take? Is it just a matter of like filing a DBA in the paper, kind of like, is it a simple thing to
It's a little more complex than that, but not a lot more. We did have to go through that process when we went from Marin Energy Authority to Marin Clean Energy. We have to refile with the state and go through a couple of steps like
Okay,
that.
you do have to do all that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to get a feeling for the level of complexity of that process. Okay.
Just briefly, since I've been on the executive committee as well and been a participant in some of the discussions that have occurred on this subject in that context, and I appreciate, Sloan, your summary of deliberations. I do want to clarify that there really isn't, even at that level, a uniformity of perspective on what's the best way to do it. My own view is that, I think I've shared this view with others, is that this is a wonderful exercise that we're pursuing. And I'm very mindful of the comments that staff has contributed by way of justifying pursuing this opportunity to take a look at what our branding really is. I think it would be premature to make any decisions at this point until we've made further progress with what staff has recommended. I think it's a terrific exercise to be going through, and I fully support it. I think, as Donna suggested, we'll have some additional information that we'll be able to discuss at the retreat. I think that's a terrific place for us to do it, as opposed to in this meeting tonight to make any decisions that may foreclose opportunities for us. And I also want to just make sure everybody understands that even going through this process, there's not a decision that's being made to reject one name or another, whether it's MCE or it's anything else. It may well be that as a result of the effort that we're going through right now, we may conclude in an informed way that MCE is the best way to go for the future of this organization. Personally, I'm not convinced that that's true. I can be persuaded otherwise. But that is certainly on the table. I think it's just important that whatever outcome we obtain from this result, it's one that's considered, it's thoughtfully done, it's professionally organized, and I am personally very supportive of the efforts of the staff to move this process forward.
Any other comments from the board? Dawn, was there something that you wanted to say?
Sloan took the words out of my mouth.
He had more than his share. All right. So I think everyone's gotten a flavor of how the meetings have been with the executive committee. So we're going to proceed along a little bit more. I would encourage everyone to go home and pull out your dictionaries and look under M and see what you can all come up with. And Kevin, I appreciate your expertise, and we're going to figure out a way to get you more absorbed into this challenging conversation.
You can have my spot, Kevin.
Happy to help.
Yeah, but I think that's probably enough on this topic for this evening.
Yes.
So let's move on to our customer programs update. And I should say we do have more things on our agenda tonight than we often do, so I hope everyone will bear with us a little bit longer.
To keep everyone holding on, just remember we will not be having an August board meeting, so you get a full month of vacation in August.
Hi, my name is Alice Stover. I am the Manager of Policy and Planning on the Customer Programs team, and I have a brief update on our programs activities. I have 3 case studies, one from each of our programs, a short update on our business plan application, and a little bit of information about the upcoming solar eclipse. The first project that I'd like to talk about is in our multifamily program. This is a project in Fairfax, and it's in partnership with the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. That is a partnership of local nonprofits, government agencies, utility providers, and funders that deliver energy efficiency, health, and safety services to Marin residents. This property is an excellent example of our partnership with GHHI. This is a 4-unit building, all of which are Section 8 units. The tenants are seniors or those with special needs, and the landlord is a Section 8 advocate who's committed to providing services to her residents. The building is in need of rehab, energy efficiency work, and some safety upgrades. Up here you can see the scope of the work that MCE is providing incentives to the property owner for. She has also received a Section 8 loan through Marin Housing Authority that will help pay for some of the safety upgrades. And we're expecting to provide her with almost $5,000 towards those energy efficiency upgrades, and the project will save around a little over 2,000 therms. The next case study is from our commercial program. This is a campaign that I think you all have heard about in the past. This is the Energize Richmond campaign. This campaign is a joint effort between MCE, PG&E, and the City of Richmond. The City of Richmond initially provided $100,000 to help match some of the deficit between the incentives that MCE provides for energy efficiency upgrades and the total cost of those projects. This campaign started in early April, and as you can see here, we've had 73 businesses enrolled, and the savings and some of the incentives that we provided are up there. Due to the success of the campaign, the City of Richmond has contributed an additional $100,000 towards the initiative. And one statistic that I think really shows how successful this has been is that before this campaign started, our program was having an average of 5 businesses do energy efficiency upgrades a month. And since this campaign started, we've had 20 a month doing energy efficiency upgrades. So that's really exciting. And a lot of these businesses have English as a second language owners, or are really businesses that would struggle to do this work without that additional funds. And then the last case study I have is from our residential program. These are very early results from our seasonal savings pilot. So this is a program that sent a message to customers in our service area with smart thermostats, asking if they would like to save up to 5% this winter on their heating bill. For those customers that said yes, we ran an algorithm that over time bumped their temperature down, starting with the times that they weren't home, then moving to the shoulder hours right before they came home or right before they left, and then bumped all of their temperature set points down. The program ran from the end of January to the end of April. We had an excellent opt-in rate. 78% of those that we sent an invitation to opted into the program. And the savings were also higher than we were expecting to see. We saved 24,000 therms, which equaled 9.4% savings per customer. So those are really exciting results. We just launched our summer seasonal savings program, which will have electric savings because those are mainly due to air conditioning, and we're excited to see what results we get there. This is an extremely brief update on our energy efficiency business plan application. We submitted that earlier this year. We're currently engaged in the regulatory process, and we anticipate a decision early in 2018. And at the end of this, I'm happy to answer any questions related to that. And now to what everyone is interested in, the solar eclipse. So I'm sure, as everyone knows, on August 21st, we will be experiencing a total solar eclipse in the United States, not in California. Northern California will see 76% of the sun blocked, which will have an effect on the amount of solar production that we see.
To give you a sense for the impact, the last eclipse in California was in 2014, and that was a partial eclipse. And since then, the solar capacity in California has more than doubled. This graph on the right shows the blue line would be what we would expect on a normal day for solar production. And then, as you can see with the yellow line, once the solar eclipse starts, solar production will drop off fairly quickly. And then as we pass through the peak of the eclipse, it will ramp back up really quickly and then go back to what we would normally expect. That total difference is about 73 megawatts. I think that is just for our service area. For the state of California as a whole, for perspective, it should be about 5,600 megawatts difference between normal production and production during the eclipse. Just a little bit of information about what MCE prepare for this. The good news is that this is a very predictable event. We know exactly what's going to happen. So with good planning, there shouldn't really be any impact to the service that our customers see. We are ensuring that we're scheduling our load accurately, coordinating closely with CAISO that has their own set of preparation activities. So there's a lot of building in of excess resources to make sure that all the needs will be met. And then lastly, just ensuring that all of our resources are operating, so there are no untimely planned maintenance projects. So like I said, with good planning, this really should not be a problem. That being said, if our local governments or customers want to participate in the work to help do that preparation for the eclipse, there are some things that you can do. So during the eclipse, turning up your thermostat by 2 to 4 degrees, powering down workstations, turning off ice machines and appliances, and not charging your electric vehicle during the eclipse are all things that will help with load. And then also just spreading the word to your residents that this is happening and that there is no need to worry. If they would like to take these activities, then they can be part of the solution.
I just want to add one comment that might not, you might not think of unless you're really thinking more deeply about it. We have a lot of customers, both residential and commercial customers, that have solar on their rooftop. And so we're not used to having load from those customers during the daytime. And so that's another thing that I think our procurement team has done a good job of trying to predict what the new load will be once those buildings are no longer relying on their installed solar system during the daytime. So we're factoring that into the load that we schedule in the day ahead market. And we think that will help hedge against any price spike that we might see on the day of the event. Do you want to add anything to that, Craig? You're leading that.
It was a really interesting presentation, Alice. Thank you both on the case studies and on the eclipse, and I'm hoping you'll share that presentation with all of us. I'd certainly like a copy of it. I think that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Super. Questions? Andrew?
Just, I don't mean to be unimpressed by the eclipse, because I think it's a wonderful event. But how is it any different from a cloudy day? I do mean that seriously. From the perspective of providing energy and planning for it.
It's more predictable than a cloudy day, but I think there are some.
Well, it's more predictable in some respects, but also the scale and the scope of it. You know, a statewide eclipse, a cloud could go over a small portion of the state, you might lose a couple hundred megawatts. We're talking 5,000 megawatts. And every home that has solar on a roof, it's a very big impact.
Yeah, Denise?
I was just wondering, when in talking about the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, does the scope of the work include permits and working with the city in terms of the incentive money?
Yeah, so we require that all of the projects that we provide incentives for have permits for the work.
Does the money go towards that? Or do they have to come up with the money for the permits with the cities?
The incentives don't go towards any costs of permitting.
Just a quick one. First of all, I want to thank you for your work in Fairfax. That property has been somewhat blighted for many years, so it's kind of a perfect one. And I like that you're also partnering with the housing authorities so that you're doing some of the safety upgrades. particularly because people have special needs, and I know I would trip over everything, but I think Denise's point of the permitting, you know, those permits for a water heater, for example, is about $500. As you work through this, I guess if you run into issues, you can contact me, and we may be able to do something about potentially waiving the fees, or, so, you know, I can put you in touch with our town manager, but I think, I wasn't aware of this project, and I think the property owner probably does not have the resources for that aspect of it. So that's something to think about on these projects. And I can't promise, but I think we can try to do something to alleviate some of that.
Thank you so much.
One other thing else, so each of us got the customer program's quarterly update, which is very handy. Was there anything that you wanted to say to us about this handout?
I don't. That's a good reference to just see the status of all of the projects in our programs, and my presentation pulled out a few examples. But yeah.
Great, thank you. Other questions, comments? Anyone from the public? All right, information only. Thank you so much. That was great. Okay, so we're moving on to item 10 on our agenda, which is the fiscal year 2016-17 financial statement presentation. This is information only. Yes, David?
Good evening, David McNeil. I'm the finance manager at MCE, and I'm very pleased to present the fiscal year 2016-2017 results to your board. MCE's financial year end is March the 31st, and every year we undergo an audit of our financial statements and then publish, make those financial statements available to our stakeholders. Our stakeholders include parties who are interested in our financial statements, include the board of directors, our energy suppliers, our banks, rating agencies, and the general public. So these are important financial results and important statements for MCE. Would love to find the cursor here. How do I make that go away? Okay, so I will try and start at the top. I apologize for the scrolling. Here we go. Okay. So here, I'm going to take you on a very brief tour of our financial statements and highlight just a few areas. So this is, again, the 2016-2017 results. The table of contents includes the independent auditor's report. I'll come to that in a moment. Management discussion and analysis, in which we discuss the results. And then the basic financial statements. The statement of net position is essentially in the balance sheet in layman's terms. The statements of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position is our income statement. Statement of cash flows and notes to the financial statements are self-explanatory. So I'm going to just jump down to the auditor's report and then touch on the statements of net position and then the income statement. So we undertake an audit every year, and that audit last year and this year was overseen by an ad hoc audit committee, and the chair of the audit committee will address the board in relationship to that process. In terms of the auditor's report, the key section is here, the opinion. And this is a boilerplate document that attaches to our financial statements. And the key statement is, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly and in all material respects the financial position of Marin Clean Energy as of March 31st, 2017 and 2016. So that's a clean bill of health from the auditors. I'm going to scroll down as best I can through the management discussion and analysis. And of course, I'm happy to take questions at the end of this presentation. To the
Tom is just weighing in here.
to the income statement. So our revenues consist of electricity sales, public purpose programs, which is largely the energy efficiency programs funded by ratepayers and overseen by the California Public Utilities Commission. The subtotal of those revenues were $181 million, and that was an increase over the previous year by approximately $30 million. The $180 million, the increase is attributable to the expansion of MCE's service territory, which occurred in September of last year. And it also includes a reduction in rates. You may recall that we reduced rates by 9% at that time. So the increased customer count took the revenues up, and the rates took them back down again, and the net impact was a $30 million increase in revenues. Scrolling down to the change in net position, we recorded a $15 million increase in the net position, which brought us to a total net position of $44 million, a little over $44 million. As you may know and should know, all of our surpluses are retained within the agency. There's no distribution to third parties. And so you see all of those, that contribution to the net position reflected here on the balance sheet. The balance sheet consists of MCE assets, and I can run through those quickly. Our liabilities, and then the difference between the assets and the liabilities is the net position. The income statement is the sum total of revenues and expenses in the course of the year, over the 12 months. The balance sheet is a point in time. So this is our total assets, total liabilities as of March 31st, 2017. And I beg your pardon, we have 2017 in the left-hand column and 2016 on the right for comparison purposes. So again, the net position increased to $44 million. You'll notice that our liabilities consist almost entirely of accrued cost-owned generation assets at MCE. We acquire electricity through power purchase agreements. So you can see our total non-current assets are $3.6 million. Skipped over cash rather quickly, but cash is, of course, very important to MCE's financial strength and our overall liquidity. Our cash position went up to $36 million. So, as I mentioned at the outset, your board created an ad hoc audit committee to oversee the audit process in March, and that audit committee met in May, and again, they received the auditor's report at the beginning of July. Maybe I'll turn over the mic to Councilman McCaskill, and you can report out on the findings of your ad hoc audit committee.
Okay, thank you, David. But just very quickly, the audit committee is made up of Ray, Sashi, Don Totson, and myself. We met last week with the external auditors. Probably the two most significant points that came out of that meeting. Typically, auditors usually propose some adjustment to the financial statements, accounting issues that staff may have overlooked and so forth. In our case, they proposed no adjustments to the financial statements that had been prepared by MCE, nor did they have any recommendations for any changes to the accounting policies or internal controls of the organization. So both of those are very positive statements. It's probably worth pointing out, just as a reminder, that and we discussed this with the auditors, is that MCE is rather unique in the fact, unlike a lot of organizations, our financial statements are not actually created internally because we outsource our accounting function to a CPA firm, Maher Accountancy, and then a separate CPA firm then comes in and audits the financial statements that have been prepared by Maher. So we kind of have a double level of internal controls that most organizations don't have. Thus, as a result, we have incredibly strong internal controls. Our committee did talk about two things in some length that I won't go into detail here, but just so you know, we had a fairly rigorous discussion about the financial risk of the organization, which primarily relate to the long-term contracts that we have for power. And we also engaged in a discussion somewhat about whether our audit committee might be called upon to do some more in-depth looking at the financial reserve policy of the organization. So other than that, my only other comment would be for those of you who are not numbers persons, I would suggest that you skip the numbers and go to the footnotes. The footnotes make good reading. You can understand them, and they'll actually inform you of a great deal of financial information about the organization.
Really helpful, Bob. Thank you. Other comments, questions from the board? Okay, all right, David, did you want to, is there anything you wanted to
No,
add?
I'm happy to take questions, but I do have the budget comparison schedules which accompany this report. So I can take some questions now or continue.
No, go ahead.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. So this is a comparison of the actual results. You'll see that in column G to the amended budget in column H. In I, we have the budget variance. And in column R over here, you have the percentage variance, if you will. So we were a little bit under budget in terms of revenues. And actually, that's less than 1%, which is a very close, we were very close to budget from a revenue perspective. We were spent less than expected or less than budgeted on the cost of energy, about 4% less. And when we do the budgeting, we include a bit of a buffer in our cost of energy, and so you're seeing that buffer not be used up essentially. And as a result, the net revenues exceeded the net energy revenues exceeded the budgeted target by about 23%. On the operating expenses, you can see that we were under budget on virtually all of the items, and that resulted in, here in column H, you have the budgeted amount of operating expenses of 14 million. The actual was 12. We were about 12% under budget, if you will. And then that falling down is what drove the increase in the net position. So we budgeted about 4% of revenues, which was 7.8 million. And we ended up with a little bit less than double that at 15.1 million. Below the line, we have capital expenditures and interfund transfers. And I have nothing special to note there. Depreciation is an estimate. It's a non-cash outlay. Any questions about the operating fund? We have three other funds, as I'm sure many of you know. The Energy Efficiency Program Fund, the Local Renewable Energy Development Fund, and the Renewable Energy Reserve Fund. We spent less than budgeted out of the Energy Efficiency Program Fund. In this case, the revenues, it's the way the funding mechanism works with the CPUC. Our expenses always basically, we're reimbursed for our expenditures. So our revenues, which is to say the proceeds we get from the California Public Utilities Commission, was equal to our expenditures. There's on the Local Renewable Energy Development Fund. This is the Deep Green, funded by 50% of Deep Green revenues. The Renewable Energy Reserve Fund was funded by an allocation from the operating fund of $1 million in 2014, I believe, fiscal 2014, 2015. The use of funds in both of these funds went to support the development of MCE Solar 1. So this is the Richmond project. And you see the expenditures made on that project coming out of both of those funds. So that's what's reflected in those numbers there. The fund balance in the Renewable Energy Development Fund is zero as of the end of the year, and it's 443,000 in the Renewable Energy Reserve Fund. Any questions?
Questions? All right. Super. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Helpful. All right. So the last substantive item on our agenda is discussion of the possibility of having an MCE contra costa office. Good evening, Sarah. Is Sarah going to kick this off?
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be the final item on tonight's agenda. My name is Sarah Estes Smith. I'm the Director of Internal Operations. So the idea of an office in the East Bay has come up at meetings of your board and the executive committee on various occasions over the years. On those occasions, it was determined that the timing was not quite right, or we didn't have enough of a need to open an office in the East Bay at that time. However, with the amount of growth that MCE has seen over the past few years, and now with the inclusion of much of Contra Costa County, it seems that the timing, the needs, and the opportunities from having an East Bay office would be right, and so therefore we're having this conversation today. There are a number of reasons why MCE needs a second office, and some of those are listed here. There are also a number of reasons why Contra Costa County is an ideal location. Currently, as to the first bullet point, there are 3 open positions that we are filling, and we do anticipate needing additional staff during this fiscal year, so we are exceeding capacity in this building. To the second point, we have heard from community advocates, elected officials, and customers that MCE could improve our customer accessibility and also demonstrate our investment in our new and existing communities by having an office in the East Bay that is strategically located. Having an East Bay office would also lend itself well to some of the new partnership opportunities that exist in Contra Costa County. And lastly, we see an opportunity to further our mission of reducing GHG emissions and promoting a better work-life balance also for our staff and our board members who live and work in the East Bay. These are the criteria. Oops. Yep. These are the criteria we've been using to determine the ideal location and the type of office we want and need. We have done good deal of research, and the top 3 locations that we've identified are Concord, Martinez, and Pittsburgh. And so I'll spend just a moment touching on each of those. Concord is centrally located in Contra Costa County, and there are currently office buildings available that meet our needs, and also public transit is very good. The average price per square foot is reasonable. And for reference, with our current building lease, the square foot price is approximately $3.25, though I will add that we are looking for a lease in Contra Costa that has all the amenities and services included. So the Concord prices are fully loaded, whereas the San Rafael price is not. So if we add in utilities, janitorial, security, and maintenance services, the fully loaded cost of the San Rafael office is more like $3.65 per square foot, just for reference. Looking at Martinez, it is of course the county seat. However, we have noticed that the public transportation options are not as good as those offered in Concord. And there are a number of opportunities in Pittsburgh in terms of redevelopment. However, there haven't been as many office spaces available that meet our needs, and public transit is also an issue here. We would be looking, if we were to go forward with Pittsburgh, we'd be looking for an office in the Old Town area. That's not served by BART currently, except by bus transfer. And even with the eBART extension planned next year, it would still require a bus transfer or a 1-mile walk or bike ride to the Old Town area. We did look and consider other locations in the county. We determined that West Contra Costa County is really too close to San Rafael to be considered strategic. Lafayette and Walnut Creek were also considered. There are a couple of BART stations in those areas. However, the commercial prices for office space are higher. And we also looked at Oakley, Danville, and San Ramon, but the locations are not as central, and public transit, again, is an issue there. So after all of our research, we determined that Concord is the ideal location for MCE's second office. And there are a number of benefits to being located in the downtown area, so I'll touch on some of those here. These are the benefits that our communities could see if we were to open an office there. Not only would it be logistically easier for our staff to reach customers during the new community enrollment phase, but also during deep green campaigns and offering energy efficiency services. But as it's been mentioned earlier, our customers and community members outside of Marin County have expressed their desire to more easily reach us. And also, there is a need for us to demonstrate our investment in the communities that we're serving by having a location in the East Bay. This location would also allow our staff to do more to partner with local entities to create renewable energy jobs, and it would offer more flexibility for our board members, our staff, and our customers who live or work in the East Bay, who could benefit from attending board and committee meetings remotely. And this last point brings us back to our mission of reducing greenhouse gas emissions generally, but also being aware of our own impacts on GHG emissions. So these are the GHG equivalencies that we have come up with. They are a conservative estimate. They don't include the reduced commute for current board members, future board members, or future staff. But as the numbers stand right now, we project that we could we could save at least 25.7 metric tons of carbon dioxide every year, if not more. It's also important to us at MCE to consider the benefits that a Concord office would have for our employees. Based on the ability to use BART instead of a car and going to Concord instead of here to San Rafael, we could reduce what our Alameda, Contra Costa, and San Francisco employees spend every year on their commute, both in dollars and minutes. So as you can see here, the average employee who lives in Oakland could save $850 a year, and it's even more impactful for our staff who live in Lafayette and Walnut Creek. The same is true, the numbers are significant for drive time, with employees living in Contra Costa County saving an average, really over an hour in their cars every single day. So getting on to how we can make the transition to having an office in Contra Costa, we've spent some time looking at our current staffing and space needs and anticipating what we might need in years to come. Our most pressing need is to make sure we have a strategically located space that that we can use for our new community enrollment period, and to make sure that it's a smooth and successful transition. Beyond that, we will need to make sure that the new location we choose is the right size for our future needs. In terms of planning for the change, we are aware that making the transition from one office to two requires a good deal of advanced planning, and we've been doing a lot of research on what we need to do to prepare for that adequately. So that includes best practices on maintaining good communication and coordination between the offices, identifying technology and tools that we need, and helping everyone prepare for the changes in advance so that it can be a successful transition. I'd also like to mention that MCE already has guidelines in place for employees who work remotely, both at home and out in the field. And so our culture is already supportive of team members who do this, and we do it well. So we have some tools in place to make it work, and as I said before, we have an idea of what more we need. Overall, the general feeling among staff is positive. There's a willingness to look at this as a new opportunity. People are excited about it. Wrapping up here, these are some of the financial impacts that we anticipate having. We are planning for them, and more detailed information will be coming to your board in an upcoming budget amendment.
And in closing, this is our very ambitious timeline. We hope to have the draft lease for a new building for consideration by the September 1st Executive Committee meeting, and we're aiming for a soft launch by the end of the year so that we can accommodate the new community enrollment. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Sashi McEntee, City of Mill Valley. Just a quick comment that it might be interesting to consider having an MCE van or something that can kind of go back and forth between the locations and that maybe could be used to, you know, like maybe we would all pile into the van and go over there for board meetings or something like that. Just a thought. I know that City of Mill Valley has, you know, some vehicles like that that are used for commute purposes. So just wanted to throw that out for your thoughts.
Maybe we'll come out of the board retreat with an autonomous vehicle.
There we go. Microtransit.
Thank you. We are also looking at the, excuse me, sorry. We're also looking at the feasibility of electric vehicles, if possible.
Kevin Wilk with Walnut Creek. So obviously this is very important and got my attention. Are you looking at having board meetings then potentially split between the offices, so going back and forth, or maybe having joint board meetings? I'm sorry? I see Darlene nodding.
Well, similar to how we are currently, oh, maybe could we have the Lafayette webcam so we can see them?
Right, so that's what I mean. Would it be a remote location hosted back and forth?
Yes, so similar to how we're doing tonight, we would anticipate having a conference room in the Contra Costa office location so that folks could choose which meeting space they wanted to go to. So it wouldn't be a rotating.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I think Concord's the perfect location for this. It's close enough to Solano as well. Easy to start to branch out that way, main highway and bar station. So I think it's terrific.
So maybe one of the last times we see you in
Yeah,
person.
right. So long.
All right, other questions or comments from the board? All right, excellent, thank you. So if I understand this correctly, on the attachment, there was a couple of different locations in Concord which you'll be looking at during this next period of deciding where the best lease opportunity is. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, super. John, anything you want to add? Super. All right, fantastic. So we have come to the end, and we will not be seeing each other in August, and so the next time we will be together will be September.
We will have our regular September executive committee meetings and executive committee meeting and technical committee meeting. So ECCOM will be on September 1st, TechCom will be on September 7th, and then we will be meeting up for our board retreat on September 22nd, which is a Friday. So until then, you all are free.
Very good. So enjoy the rest of your summers, everyone. Thank you. We're adjourned.